"Let go of that now, you gutter rat!" The scream was not just a sound, it was an explosion that shattered the silent peace of the 20th floor. It echoed through the empty, luxurious executive hallway, ricocheting off the cold, polished marble walls, amplifying the contained violence in those words. There was no warning, no prior conversation, no chance for defense. Only sharp, sudden, brutal pain. Sadie felt the world spin. Marcus's fingers, the bank's chief financial officer, dug into her slender wrist like a bird of prey's talons. The grip was inhuman, a vice of flesh and bone designed to inflict maximum damage in the shortest possible time. She felt the joint crack, a searing pain that shot up her arm and exploded behind her eyes, forcing her to release a muffled, strangled moan that died in her dry throat before turning into a plea for help. The bucket of water with lavender disinfectant, which was by his side like a silent work companion, toppled with the violence of the abrupt movement. The grey, soapy water slowly spread across the priceless Persian rug, a dark stain advancing like blood. But Marcus, the man who always yelled about any speck of dust on the floor, did not even blink. He did not care about the rug. Not now. His focus, that glazed look injected with red veins and overflowing with pure malice, was fixed on the only thing Sadie protected against her chest, with her free hand, as if it were a shield, as if it were her own life. A yellowed envelope, dirty with years of accumulated dust and with edges creased by time. "Please, Mr. Marcus, you are hurting me. You are breaking my arm," Sadie pleaded, her voice trembling, thin, broken by terror. Her large brown eyes instantly welled up, overflowing with tears of physical pain and a humiliation that burned more than her bruised skin. "I was just going to hand it in. I swear. I found it behind the large cabinet." "Found it?" Marcus laughed. It was a dry, metallic, cruel sound that seemed to tear through the cold air conditioning of the hallway. He did not ease the pressure. On the contrary, he twisted her arm harder, at an unnatural angle, making the small, fragile body of the cleaner bend forward, forcing her to her knees before him in a position of forced submission. "Do you think I was born yesterday, girl? Do you think I am an idiot?" He brought his face close to hers. Sadie could smell him, a sickening mix of expensive whiskey, cigar, and mint, the scent of power that allows itself everything. "You forged this!" He spat the words, splattering her face with saliva. "You spent the night writing this garbage with shaky handwriting, dirtying paper in the trash, to try and pull a gold digging scheme on the depressed widower, didn't you? Confess, you trash. Confess you wanted to take his money." "No, I swear on my mother's life." Sadie's tears finally escaped, hot and salty, tracing clean paths on her face, pale from exhaustion and without makeup. "I was cleaning the baseboard. The cabinet is very heavy. I dragged it a little and it fell from behind. Mr. Sterling's name is written on it. I just wanted to do the right thing." "Shut your filthy mouth!" Marcus shook Sadie as if she were an old, worthless rag doll. Her grey uniform, loose, worn, and with the faded logo of the outsourced company on the pocket, looked even more humble and pathetic next to the director's impeccable Italian-cut suit, which cost more than Sadie's entire apartment. The power disparity there was repulsive, almost obscene. He was a furious giant, a man who decided destinies with a pen, she merely an invisible woman trying to survive another night shift to buy medicine. "You are an opportunist, a cheap little thief," Marcus continued, his voice rising, hysterical. "I should call the police right now. I should throw you into a filthy cell, which is the place for people of your kind who try to take advantage of others' pain to get ahead in life." "Give that to me now." Marcus advanced with his other hand, fingers extended like hooks, to snatch the envelope from her chest. But Sadie, with an instinct for self-preservation she didn't even know she possessed, abruptly turned her body, offering her back to the aggressor and protecting the paper with her very life shrinking against the wall. She knew that paper was important. She did not know the exact content, but she had felt a different energy when she touched it amidst the dirt and cobwebs. It was not trash. It was something sacred. The name Julian written there carried weight, a sadness, and Marcus's disproportionate and violent reaction only confirmed its value. If he wanted to destroy it, it was because Julian needed to see it. "If you tear this, Mr. Sterling will never know." She sobbed, her body trembling violently, trying to break free unsuccessfully, his nails tearing the skin of her wrist. "Julian does not need any more emotional trash in his life. I am his best friend. I protect him from people like you," Marcus yelled, completely losing control. "I'm doing him a favor by cleaning up this mess. Now let go, you wretched woman." Marcus pulled her arm with such violence that Sadie felt her shoulder would dislocate. She screamed. It was a sharp, primitive cry of real physical pain that cut through the executive floor's silence like an emergency siren. Annoyed by her resistance, Marcus released her wrist, only to raise his free hand. He clenched his fist. His face was red, swollen with uncontrolled fury. The mask of the polished executive, the rational businessman, had completely fallen, revealing the arrogant and violent monster he hid beneath his silk tie. He was going to hit her. There, in the middle of the bank's most important hallway, under the disconnected cameras, he was going to beat an employee over an old piece of paper. Sadie saw the fist rise. Time seemed to slow down. She squeezed her eyes shut, hunching her shoulders, bracing for impact. Her heart pounded so hard it ached in her ribs, a frantic drum of panic. In a second, disconnected thoughts flashed through her mind. Her sick mother at home waiting for dinner, the overdue electricity bill, the shame of coming home hurt, the fear of losing the job that was her only lifeline. Everything was going to end there, with blood on the carpet. She held her breath, preparing for the pain, but the blow never came. "Take your hand off her." The voice was not a shout. It was not loud. It was a low, hoarse command, almost a whisper, but laden with such icy, absolute authority that it made the hallway's temperature drop 10 degrees instantly. It was the sound of a storm about to break. Marcus froze mid-motion. His hand stopped in the air, his fist still clenched, trembling slightly. His eyes, previously filled with murderous fire, widened in pure panic, the color draining from his face. He knew that voice. It was the voice of the one who signed his millionaire checks, of the one who had built that empire, of the one he feared more than death itself. Sadie slowly opened her eyes, her breath caught in her throat, fear still pulsing through her veins. Stepping out of the shadows of the double-solid oak door of the CEO's office, which stood ajar, was Julian. He did not look like the billionaire from business magazines, the ruthless man who bought and sold companies before breakfast. He looked like a ghost. His jacket was off, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and his sleeves haphazardly rolled up, revealing tense forearms. His beard was unshaven for days, a dark shadow on his face, giving him an air of deep geological weariness. They were the dark circles of someone who does not sleep, of someone who carries the weight of the world and the pain of a loss that never heals, that never relents. But his eyes. Julian's eyes were not tired at that moment. They were fixed on Marcus's hand, that hand which seconds before had gripped Sadie's wrist, and they burned with a silent, focused, and terrible fury. "Julian," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking, high-pitched. He released Sadie's wrist as if her skin had suddenly caught fire, as if she were radioactive. He took a quick step back, tripping over his own feet, nervously adjusting his tie with trembling hands, desperately trying to regain his director's composure, trying to put his mask back on. Mr. Sterling, I did not know you were still in the building. The lights were off. I thought that... Were you going to hit her, Marcus?" Julian asked, completely ignoring the flimsy excuse. His voice was monotone, dangerously calm. He took a step forward, stepping out of the shadows. The cold light of the hallway illuminated his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. He averted his gaze from Marcus and looked at Sadie. He saw everything in a second. He saw the red, almost purple finger marks imprinted on her slender wrist. He saw her trembling body cowering against the wall. He saw the overturned bucket. He saw the absolute terror in the young woman's eyes, the fear of a cornered animal. "No, never! You know me!" Marcus laughed, a nervous, pathetic laugh that sounded like a bark. He broke out in a cold sweat. "I was merely containing a security threat. Standard procedure. I caught this cleaning lady trying to infiltrate your private office. She had a paper trying to forge documents. You know how these people are, Julian. They are like vultures. They see your fragility, your grief, and they try to take advantage, try to get a piece. I was protecting you. I just wanted to take the evidence of the crime from her hand." Sadie sobbed softly, unable to speak, rubbing her aching wrist, trying to get the blood flowing again. She wanted to run, to get out of there, to vanish into thin air, but her legs trembled too much to support her weight. She still held the envelope against her chest, crumpled but safe. It was the only thing keeping her upright. Julian did not look at Marcus. He walked slowly towards Sadie, his steps muffled by the wet carpet. She instinctively recoiled, pressing her back hard against the cold wall, shrinking away. The fear that he would be like Marcus, that he would also yell, that he would be the boss who defends the director, paralyzed her. After all, they were from the same world. She was just the cleaning staff. But Julian stopped a yard away from her, respecting her space. He did not yell. He made no sudden movements. He extended his hand, palm open upward, in a gesture of request, of plea, not of command. His hands also trembled, but not from anger. "What do you have there?" His voice was soft now, unrecognizable compared to the tone he had used with Marcus. It still carried its usual sadness, that hoarseness of someone who had cried a lot, but there was kindness. "It's a scam, Julian. For God's sake, do not touch that," Marcus yelled from behind him, desperate, taking a step forward. "She must have put some contact poison on that paper, or it's a kidnapping threat letter. Let security handle it. I'll call the guards now. They'll take her to the basement and—" "Shut up, Marcus," Julian said without turning around. The order was dry, quick, cutting like the crack of a whip in the silence. Marcus fell silent, swallowing hard, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. He knew when he had crossed the line. Sadie looked at Julian's hand, large, with long fingers, waiting patiently. Then she looked at his face. There was something there that was not anger. It was curiosity and pain, a pain she recognized because she saw it in the mirror every day since her father died and her mother fell ill. With trembling hands, her fingers aching from the effort of holding on, she peeled the envelope from her chest and extended it into the void between them. "I swear I didn't write anything, Mr. Sterling," she whispered, her voice failing, hoarse from crying. He fell from behind the filing cabinet, that heavy grey metal one. "I was cleaning the baseboard. There was a lot of dust. I think it had been there for a long time." Julian took the envelope. The moment his fingers touched the texture of the yellowed linen paper, time stopped. The universe contracted to that rectangle of paper. He knew that paper. It was not office paper. It was personal stationery, imported, with a specific weight that his wife, Eleanor, loved to use. But it was not the paper that made the air leave his lungs, that made his heart skip a beat and then race erratically. It was the scent. Even after years lost in the dust, trapped in the dark behind a piece of furniture, muffled by the grime, a faint, almost imperceptible aroma of lavender and jasmine still emanated from it. Her perfume. That perfume he had tried to find in other women, in stores, in bottles, but which was never the same. the scent of her skin. And then he lowered his eyes and saw the handwriting. For my Julian. Open only when longing hurts more than fear. The handwriting was shaky, weak, the letters leaning to the right. It was not the firm, elegant handwriting she had before. It was the handwriting of someone who no longer had the strength to hold the pen firmly, but who insisted on writing. Her handwriting in her last days at the hospital when the painkillers made her drowsy, but she refused to sleep without saying what she needed to. Julian's world spun. The hallway, the bank, the millions, Marcus, the cleaner, everything vanished into a grey mist. He let out a strangled sound, an animal gasp of pain that made Sadie bring her hands to her mouth in shock. The powerful man's hands, which controlled the financial market, began to tremble violently, uncontrollably, so much so that the paper rattled like a dry leaf in a storm. "Eleanor," he whispered. The name tore from his throat, a piece of his soul leaving with it. Marcus, realizing the situation was completely out of his control and that Julian was in a state of extreme vulnerability, tried one last dirty trick. Greed spoke louder than fear. He approached, placing a heavy hand on Julian's shoulder, trying to bring him back to reason, trying to manipulate his emotions as he always did. "Julian, please, be rational," Marcus said with his poisoned velvet voice. "This woman may have copied the handwriting from some old card she found in the trash. This is cruelty. It is a cheap psychological trick. Let us tear this up now and end this suffering. I will do this for you." Julian spun his body in a sudden, explosive movement. He shoved Marcus against the opposite wall with a strength no one would have thought he possessed in that state. The thud of the director's back against the marble was dull and painful. Julian did not assault him with punches. He did worse. He trapped him with his gaze, bringing his face inches from Marcus's. "If you touch this paper," Julian growled, his teeth clenched, his voice vibrating with a lethal threat, "if you dare to say one more time that this is fake, I will finish you, Marcus. I will bury you. Do you understand? I will destroy everything you are." Marcus paled until his lips turned white. He raised his hands in absolute surrender, cowering. He saw professional and social death in those eyes. "All right, Julian. All right. Calm down. I just wanted to help, my God." Julian stepped back, taking a deep breath, his chest rising and falling erratically, trying to control the emotional tsunami that threatened to drown him right there. He looked at the envelope again, as if it were a sacred relic. He had searched for it for months after her death. He knew she had asked for paper and a pen on her last night. He knew she had written something, but in the confusion of the funeral, the mourning, the renovation that Marcus insisted on doing in the office to clear the heavy atmosphere, the letter had disappeared. He thought he had lost her last voice forever. He thought she had left without saying goodbye. And now this cleaner, this invisible girl who trembled with fear in the corner of the hallway with her wrist marked, she had brought it back. She had rescued Eleanor's voice from the dust. With reverent, almost religious care, Julian slipped his finger under the envelope flap and tore the seal. The sound of the paper tearing was the only noise in the world. His fingers seemed thick and clumsy. He pulled the single sheet from inside. Sadie watched everything in silence, her heart heavy, forgetting her own pain. She saw the tears begin to stream down Julian's face even before he started to read. They were silent, heavy tears that wet his shirt and the paper. He read it right there, standing in the middle of the hallway. "My love, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. And if it took you a while to find, it is because life went on, as it should. I do not want you to die with me, Julian. I see how you look at me with that fear of being alone. The bank, the money, success, none of it matters if your heart turns to stone, if you close yourself off in that glass tower. Promise me you will look for the light again. that you will let someone take care of you, even if it is just to hold your hand on a bad day. Do not feel guilty for living. I love you forever, but I want you to live in the now. Be happy, my grumpy bear." Julian sobbed loudly. It was a sound of liberation, of a dam breaking after 3 years of drought, of concrete and of silence. He folded the letter and pressed it against his lips, closing his eyes tightly. His body bowed under the weight of gratitude and longing. The silence lasted a full minute. No one dared to move. The sound of the most powerful man in the building's suppressed crying humanized the sterile environment. Even Marcus, leaning against the wall, seemed to have understood that any word now would be his end. Finally, Julian opened his eyes. They were red, swollen, devastated, but there was a clarity in them that hadn't existed before. A faint but real light. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and turned to Sadie. She flinched, lowering her head, expecting to be sent away. After all, she had seen her boss cry. She had seen his fragility, his secret. Wealthy people do not like witnesses to their weaknesses. "What is your name?" he asked. His voice was choked, hoarse, but incredibly gentle. "Sadie, sir." "Sadie Bennett." Julian nodded slowly, registering the name. He looked at the floor, at the overturned bucket, at the water soaking the Persian rug, and then at her wrist, which was visibly starting to swell and turn purple. "Sadie," he said the name as if testing the sound, as if it were a prayer. "Do you know what you just did?" "I am sorry for the mess, sir," Sadie despaired, misinterpreting the question. "I will clean everything right now. I will get dry cloths. It will not stain, I promise." She quickly bent down to pick up the bucket, desperate to be useful, not to be punished, to justify her existence there. "No!" Julian stepped forward with surprising speed and held her hand, preventing her from touching the wet floor. His touch was firm but incredibly careful, avoiding the injured area, holding only her fingers. His hands were warm. "Leave that there. You will not clean anything today. You will never again clean a mess that is not yours." He gently pulled her up, making her stand. Then he slowly turned to Marcus. The change in Julian's demeanor was terrifying. The sadness evaporated, replaced by the ruthless executive's icy resolve. "Marcus," Julian's tone was sharp. "You hurt an employee within my company. You accused her of a crime without proof. You humiliated her physically and morally." "It was a misunderstanding, Julian, I swear." Marcus tried to smile, an oily grin that wavered at the corners of his mouth. "I was stressed with the quarters closing. The numbers aren't adding up. You know how the pressure is." I lost my head for a second. "We've been friends for 20 years. Friends do not hit defenseless women." Julian cut him off. "Starting tomorrow morning, you will no longer have any authority over the general services, security, or human resources teams." "What?" Marcus pushed off the wall, indignation momentarily overcoming fear. "Julian, I am the chief financial officer. You cannot strip me of my operational authority because of a cleaner. The board will not accept this. I have contracts, I have rights. The board eats out of my hand, Marcus. And you will be on your knees thanking me for not firing you right now, for cause, and calling the police to report assault." Julian took a step toward him, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "The only reason you're keeping your technical position and your office is because we are in the middle of the annual audit, and you know this bank's phantom figures better than anyone. I cannot stop the bank now, but your moral authority is gone." Julian pointed his finger at Marcus's chest. "If you look at Sadie the wrong way again, if you speak to her without apologizing, you are out. And I guarantee you, Marcus, I will dedicate every cent of my fortune to ensure you never get a job, not even as a supermarket cashier in this city. Am I clear?" Marcus clenched his jaw, his eyes blazing with contained hatred. He looked at Sadie as if he wanted to strangle her, blaming her for his downfall. But Julian's presence was an insurmountable wall. He knew he had lost the battle, but the war was just beginning in his sick mind. "Crystal clear, Julian," Marcus hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "I am going to my office. I have work to do. Numbers do not wait for sentimental dramas." He walked past Sadie, deliberately bumping her shoulder as he left, a final act of childish and petty defiance, before disappearing down the hallway with heavy steps. Julian sighed, running a hand over his tired face, as if brushing away an invisible cobweb. He seemed to have aged and rejuvenated at the same time in the last 10 minutes. He looked at Sadie, who still held the wet floor rag against her leg, as if it were her only shield against the world. "Come," he said, picking up his jacket that lay tossed over a reception chair. "Where to, sir?" "To HR. To sign my resignation and the confidentiality agreement," Sadie asked, her voice fading, her hope dying. It was always like this. The rich made a scene, but the poor paid the price. Julian looked at her, genuinely surprised and hurt by the question. "Resignation?" He shook his head, a sad, ironic smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. "Sadie, you just gave me my life back. You brought it back to me. I'm going to take you home." "No need, sir. Absolutely not." Sadie recoiled, alarmed. "I'll take the night bus. It stops on the corner. It's dangerous for you to go to my neighborhood in that car. And I'm dirty. I insist, and I need you to see a doctor for that wrist. I won't argue. Let's go." Julian left no room for refusal. He placed his blazer over her shoulders. The fabric was cool wool, soft, heavy, and carried his scent. Woody, sandalwood, and something expensive she couldn't name. Sadie felt strange, small, as if she were wearing armor that didn't belong to her, but which warmed her from a cold she didn't even know she felt. They descended in the private elevator in silence. The gilded mirror of the elevator reflected the unlikely pair, the disheveled billionaire and the janitor in a grey uniform with a bruised arm, wearing a $3,000 blazer. When they arrived at the underground parking garage and got into the black armored car, the silence continued, but it was no longer oppressive. It was the silence of two people who had just survived a collapse. The car was a cocoon, isolated from the world, with leather seats that embraced their bodies. As Julian drove through the empty streets in the early morning, the city passing outside like a blur of neon lights and shadows, he began to speak. Not as a boss, but as a man, looking at the road. "My wife, Eleanor. She always said that important things hide in unlikely places. The truth likes to hide in the dust." He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. "I turned that entire office upside down. I hired specialized companies, and it was there the whole time, behind a cabinet. Sometimes we only see what's at eye level, sir," Sadie said softly, looking at her own calloused hands in her lap. "Those who clean the floor see the world from the bottom up. We see what no one else sees, because no one looks where we look." Julian glanced at her, surprised by the depth of the statement. "You speak differently from the other cleaning staff, Sadie. No offense, but you have vocabulary, a way of structuring your thoughts." Sadie blushed in the dim light of the car, embarrassed for having spoken too much. "I finished high school on scholarship, and, well, I'm in college. Online." "Really?" His interest was genuine. "What are you studying? Accounting?" she said with a hint of pride, straightening her back, but soon lowered her head again. "I am in my final year, but it is hard to pay tuition, and studying after spending all night cleaning restrooms and hallways. Sometimes I fall asleep on my calculus textbooks. The formulas blend with my sleep." Julian frowned, processing the information. A cleaner who studied accounting and spent her nights cleaning the bank he managed. And Marcus, the CFO, had treated her like illiterate trash, like an ignorant gold digger just minutes ago. The irony was bitter and revolting. How much talent was he wasting? How many Sadies had Marcus's system crushed? Why did you never apply for an internal position at the bank? We have internship programs, trainee programs. The bank pays for studies. I tried, sir. 3 times. Sadie sighed, looking out the window. The landscape changed. Glass buildings gave way to low-rise houses, graffiti-covered walls, and potholed streets. They were entering the projects, but HR does not even look at the records of outsourced employees. Marcus implemented an unwritten rule. He says that those born for the bucket are not fit for the calculator. That stains the corporate image. Julian felt a wave of physical nausea. The toxic and elitist culture Marcus had implanted in the bank was right under his nose, rotting the company's foundation, and he, blinded by grief, had never seen it. Until now. Eleanor's letter had not only saved his soul, it had opened his eyes to the rot around him. The car stopped in front of a small house at the end of a dead-end street. The wall was peeling, revealing bare bricks, and the iron gate was corroded by rust. It was a violent, almost aggressive contrast to the luxury of the German armored car. On the sidewalk, trash bags were piled up because the truck had not passed on that street for days due to the rain. "This is it," Sadie said, taking his jacket from his shoulders and folding it with extreme care as if it were made of crystal. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Sterling, and I am so sorry about your wife. Truly. The letter, what little you read aloud, seemed very beautiful. She must have been a person of light." Julian held the jacket, but his eyes were fixed on the house. He saw a faint, yellowish light flickering in the front window. He saw the precariousness, the daily struggle for survival imprinted on every brick. Sadie. He called her before she opened the car door. She stopped, her hand on the doorknob, her heart racing. "Tomorrow night, do not go to the cleaning crew. Do not wear that uniform," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "Go to basement level 2. Look for room 04. It is dead records." "Dead records?" She frowned, confused. "But that is where the old boxes are. No one has gone there in years. They say there are rats." "That is where we keep physical and tax documents from decades ago. It is true, it is dusty, quiet and lonely, but it needs to be organized. I have been asking for this for years and no one does it." He stared at her. "It needs someone who understands accounting to know what to throw away and what to keep. And it needs someone who has..." He paused, searching for the exact word, integrity. Someone who is not afraid of dirt, but who has a clean mind. "Are you offering me another job?" Her voice faltered. "I am offering you a chance. The salary is double what you earn at the outsourced company, plus bank benefits, and you will have a desk, a computer, and silence, and time to study if you finish your daily goal." Julian looked her in the eyes, sealing a silent pact. "Marcus has no power down there. It is my personal archive. Do you accept?" Sadie's heart pounded, beating in her throat. Double the salary, a signed contract, leaving the heavy cleaning, working with documents, with what she was studying. It seemed like a feverish dream, too good to be true. I accept. My God, I accept. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I will not disappoint you, sir. Do not thank me yet. It is a boring and solitary job, but it is a start. And Sadie." He lightly touched her hand again. "Take care of that wrist." Sadie smiled. It was a smile that lit up her tired face, transforming her completely, revealing a beauty that sadness had hidden. Julian felt something strange in his chest, a timid warmth he had not felt in years, a spark of life. "Good evening, Sadie." "Good evening, mister." She got out of the car and ran to the gate, holding her purse against her chest. Julian waited for her to safely enter, locked the gate and waved from the window before he drove off. He touched the inside pocket of his suit jacket, where the letter was kept, over his heart. For the first time in 3 years, he did not want to die to find Eleanor. He wanted to live to see what would happen tomorrow. Sadie entered her apartment, leaning her back against the thin wooden door, taking a deep breath of the stuffy air in the small room. Her heart soared with hope. The scent of his car was still on her clothes, double the salary. She could pay the 3 overdue payments. She could buy real meat for Sunday dinner. She could fix the leaky roof. But the bubble of happiness burst the next second, pierced by the cruel reality of her life. A sound coming from the tiny room next door brought her back to earth. It was not a human sound. It was a cough, dry, deep, drawn out, as if there were shards of glass inside the chest. The sound of lungs that could no longer fight. "Mom!" Sadie dropped her bag on the torn sofa and rushed to the room. Ms. Ruth was sitting on the bed, surrounded by old pillows to help her breathe. She was pale as wax, her almost transparent skin stretched over the bones of her face. She held a handkerchief stained with fresh blood against her mouth. The wheezing of her breath filled the room like the sound of a punctured bellows. "Sadie, my daughter, you arrived early," her mother whispered, her voice fading, trying to hide the handkerchief, trying to shield her daughter from the truth. "The medicine, the inhaler, ran out this afternoon. I tried to ration the doses, but I can't get air, daughter. The air won't go in." Sadie looked at the chipped wooden nightstand. The medicine bottle was empty, tipped on its side, and next to it, illuminated by the dim light of the bedside lamp, was a red paper that Sadie knew all too well. A paper that burned her eyes, a judicial eviction notice. "Final notice, vacate in 48 hours, read the black stamp in impersonal block letters. The joy of the new job was instantly crushed by the overwhelming weight of the present. The first bank salary would only arrive in 30 days. The advance would take a week, but her mother did not have 30 days. Perhaps she did not even have 30 hours without that expensive medicine. And they did not have 48 hours in that house. Sadie walked to the bed and held her mother's cold hand, despair rising in her throat like bile, bitter and suffocating. She had found the letter that saved her millionaire boss's soul. She had gained a golden opportunity, but who would save her mother's life tonight? Outside, the sound of Julian's armored car engine had already faded into the night, taking with it safety, the scent of sandalwood, and the promise of a future that suddenly seemed unattainable in the face of the death lurking in that damp room. Sadie hugged her mother and cried, not from wrist pain, but from helplessness. The service elevator descended with a metallic jolt that reverberated through Sadie's bones, finally stopping at basement level 2. The digital panel blinked the number 2 with a faint, almost dying red light. When the heavy doors opened, the air that hit Sadie's face did not carry the artificial lavender scent of the executive floors, nor the aroma of espresso and filtered air conditioning from the reception area. It smelled of old paper, dry glue, stagnant dust, and oblivion. It was the smell of time standing still. Sadie adjusted her bag strap on her shoulder, protecting her bandaged wrist, and took the first step into her new kingdom, dead records. It was a vast, cavernous room with a low, raw concrete ceiling crisscrossed by exposed pipes that dripped into strategically placed buckets, creating a constant, maddening soundtrack. Plink, plink, plink. Endless rows of grey metal shelves, some rusted at the bases from the constant dampness, stretched into the darkness at the back, creating an oppressive labyrinth of cardboard boxes. The only light came from flickering fluorescent tube lights, giving the place a ghostly horror movie feel, like somewhere the heroine should never go. But for Sadie, it was paradise. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with that musty air. There were no filthy toilets to scrub. There were no overflowing trash cans with leftover food from executives who wouldn't even look her in the eye. There was no constant noise of phones and printers. There was only silence and order waiting to be made. And most importantly, the salary. That amount that shone in her mind like a beacon, the only thing capable of buying the air missing from her mother's lungs. She walked to the only wooden table in the center of the room, an island of light under a more stable lamp. The table was covered with a thick layer of grey dust, like dirty snow. Sadie took a tissue from her pocket and wiped a space clean, coughing lightly at the cloud that rose. She placed her crumpled plastic water bottle on the clean wood. "Well done, Sadie," she whispered to herself, her voice echoing faintly against the concrete walls, sounding small in that vastness. "It's just paper. Paper doesn't scream, paper doesn't humiliate, paper doesn't hit. Let's get to work." She had a mission. Julian, Mr. Sterling, the man who had defended her like a wounded lion the night before, the man who had cried in front of her, had trusted her. He had given her a key and a chance. She could not fail. She would prove she was worth every penny of that doubled salary. She opened the first box marked with old masking tape, Financial 2019 A to F. Hours passed, but time down there seemed distorted. Without windows to see the sun, Sadie guided herself by the rhythm of her own work. For most people, organizing moldy invoices would be a tedious torture, a punishment. For Sadie, who loved the unbreakable logic of accounting, it was like assembling a giant puzzle. She separated expenses, smoothed crumpled receipts, and created meticulous piles of questions confirmed and pending. Her mind, sharpened by late-night studies by candlelight, began to fall into a hypnotic, almost meditative rhythm. Debit here, credit there, date, amount, signature. She forgot the throbbing pain in her wrist, forgot the paralyzing fear of eviction, forgot her mother's cough. There, amidst the paper chaos, she was competent. She was in control. She was someone. But the peace of the basement was a fragile illusion, made of thin glass. Around 3 in the afternoon, when her back already ached from being hunched over, Sadie heard the sound. It was not the dripping water. It was not the electric hum of the lights. It was the unmistakable, crisp and authoritative sound of Italian leather shoes hitting the raw concrete. Heavy, deliberate footsteps that asked for no permission. Thump, thump, thump. Sadie froze, an invoice suspended in the air, her fingers paralyzed. Her blood ran cold. She knew that rhythm. She looked towards the entrance of the maze of shelves, where the darkness was densest. A shadow stretched across the concrete floor before its owner appeared, distorted and long like a nightmare. Marcus emerged from behind a shelf, walking slowly, like a predator emerging from its lair, knowing its prey has nowhere to run. He was not yelling today. His navy suit was impeccable, without a wrinkle, his hair slicked back with shiny gel, but his face was contorted in a smile that did not reach his eyes. They were cold, dead eyes, shark eyes that smelled blood in the water. "Well, well, well." His voice slid through the room, unctuous, echoing off the damp walls. The gutter rat found a new hole to hide in, a very deep hole where no one can hear her squeals. Sadie stood up instinctively, her heart pounding against her ribs, remembering the pain of his grip the night before. She placed the table between herself and him, a fragile barricade of old wood. "Mr. Sterling assigned me here, Mr. Marcus," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, though her knees trembled beneath her uniform skirt. "It is a direct order from the CEO's office. I am working." Marcus chuckled softly, a sound devoid of humor, only contempt. He began to walk around the table, circling her like a wolf circles a lost sheep. He ran his fingers over the dusty file boxes, looking at the dust on his fingertips with theatrical disgust. "Order from the CEO's office," he scoffed, mimicking her voice with derision. "You think you're very special now, don't you, Cinderella? You think that because you shed some crocodile tears, made a dramatic scene in the hallway, and handed over an old letter, you've become his protégé, the new boss around here. I am just doing my job, sir. I just want to secure my salary." Work. Marcus stopped abruptly. With a quick and violent movement, he kicked a box of files that was on the floor. The sound of cardboard tearing and papers flying made Sadie jump in fright and take a step back. "This isn't work. This is charity, you stupid girl. Julian feels sorry for you. He looks at you with those cheap clothes and that hungry face and sees an injured stray puppy. He threw you a bone to gnaw on down here to feel like a good Samaritan." He approached the table, leaning over it, invading Sadie's personal space. She could smell his cologne again, that mix of mint and expensive tobacco that now made her nauseous with pure dread. "But do you know what happens to the rich man's mercy, Sadie?" he whispered, his eyes fixed on hers. "It runs out, it dries up, and fast." "You cannot touch me," Sadie said, clinging to Julian's promise as if it were a talisman. "He said, if you bothered me, he would fire you." Marcus's smile vanished. The mention of Julian's threat touched the open wound of his ego. "I am not touching you," Marcus said, raising his open hands, smiling cynically. "I am just conducting a routine inspection of the archive. As Chief Financial Officer, it is my duty to safeguard the bank's assets. And you are a risk to those assets." He looked at the organized stacks of paper on her desk. His eyes narrowed, assessing. Being a man of numbers, he recognized the competence of the organization. He saw the logic in the stacks. This seemed to irritate him even more. A cleaner could not be intelligent. This offended the natural order of his world. "He will tire of playing savior," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "He has a bank to manage, investors to please, parties to attend. And when he forgets about you, when he returns to his real world, up there at the top of the tower, I will be here. And I do not forget. I will crush you, Sadie. I will make you wish you had never crawled out of the gutter you came from." He slammed his hand down hard on the stack of papers she had spent hours organizing, scattering everything across the dirty, wet floor. The invoices flew like sad confetti. "Oops. Clumsy me," he said emotionlessly, wiping his hand on his jacket. "Clean that up. That's what you're for, isn't it? Cleaning up the messes we make." Marcus turned his back and walked toward the elevator, his footsteps echoing like funeral chimes. Before entering, he stopped and looked back, just a silhouette against the light. "And Sadie, watch out for the rats. They love fresh meat." The doors closed, taking the monster away. Sadie waited for the sound of the elevator ascending before releasing the breath held in her aching lungs. She sank into the chair, her legs giving out, her trembling hands covering her face. She wanted to cry. She wanted to grab her bag and run home, hug her mother, and never return to that cursed place. But the image of the eviction notice came to her mind, the sound of her mother's cough. "No," she said, lowering her hands. Her eyes were dry and hard. "I need this money. He won't win. I'm not leaving here." She bent down to pick up the papers from the damp floor, and it was at that moment, on her knees, rearranging the mess that Marcus's hatred had created, that fate intervened. One of the invoices that flew furthest, landing near a dark puddle, caught her eye. Not because of the wet paper, but because of the amount. It was an invoice 3 years old. The paper was almost brown. Sadie picked it up carefully. Amount, $150,000. Description, strategic consulting, Delta Solutions. Sadie frowned. $150,000 for a consulting service. She knew the market prices. It was high, but not impossible. But something about it bothered her accounting instinct. She remembered seeing another Delta invoice in the 2020 box, and another in the 2021 box. With a hunter's instinct, Sadie forgot her fear. Professional curiosity took over. She began to rummage through the boxes Marcus had kicked, frantically, no longer to organize, but to investigate. 10 minutes later, she had 5 invoices on the table, lined up side by side like pieces of a crime. All from Delta Solutions, all with round figures, without odd cents, which is extremely rare for actual services, all issued on the 30th of each month, or with vague descriptions: general consulting, logistics support, management consulting, and all of them, without exception, with an authorization signature in the bottom right corner. A quick, aggressive flourish made with a heavy black ink pen. Marcus's signature. "Delta Solutions," Sadie murmured, her brain working a mile a minute. "I've never heard of this company in the meetings I cleaned." She pulled her old cell phone from her pocket with its cracked screen and connected to her limited mobile data. With trembling fingers, she typed the federal tax ID number printed on the invoice into the IRS website. The loading circle spun endlessly due to the poor signal in the basement. Finally, the screen loaded. Inactive CNPJ, deactivated for non-existence. Address, Camellia Street, 0. Vacant lot. Sadie's heart stopped for a second and then pounded wildly against her chest. It was not just disorganization. It was not a mistake. It was theft. Systematic, multi-million-dollar continuous theft. Marcus had been draining money from the bank for years, using a shell company that he himself must have controlled, and hiding the physical evidence here in dead records, the place he called a dump, where no one ever looked because everyone trusted the digital systems he also controlled. He did not hate her just because she was poor. He hated her because she was a threat. She was sitting on top of the secret that could send him to jail for 20 years. My God! Sadie covered her mouth with her hand, looking at the papers as if they were pure dynamite. I have the proof. I have the weapon. If she handed this to Julian, Marcus would be finished. The tables would turn. Julian would see that she was not just a charity case, but a valuable ally. But before she could decide what to do, the metallic sound of the elevator echoed again. The doors opened. Sadie jumped in her chair. In a pure reflex, she threw an empty cardboard folder over the 5 Delta invoices, hiding them from view. Her heart pounded in her throat. If it were Marcus returning, if he saw what she had found, he would kill her right there. No one would hear her screams in the basement, but it was not Marcus. "Sadie?" The voice was deep, but it carried no fear. It brought a strange calm, a soft melancholy. Julian stood at the archive entrance, under the flickering light. But he looked different. He had removed his silk tie, his collar button was undone, and the sleeves of his white shirt were rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong arms. In each hand he held a steaming cup of coffee. He looked less like an unreachable billionaire and more like an ordinary, exhausted man seeking refuge from a storm. "Mr. Sterling!" Sadie jumped to her feet, frantically smoothing her uniform, trying to hide the tremor in her hands. "Sir." "Down here? Again?" "I needed to get away," he confessed, a tired smile forming wrinkles around his eyes. He walked over to her, dodging the drips and buckets with surprising naturalness for someone who lived in marble. "The board meetings. They are full of empty words and people full of certainties. I needed a quiet place, and I figured the coffee machine down here had been broken since 1990, so I brought my own." He held out one of the cups to her. It was from a famous coffee shop. The rich scent of hazelnut and roasted coffee filled the musty air, fighting against the smell of mildew. "Thank you, sir." Sadie took the cup, feeling the warmth spread through her cold hands. "But you shouldn't be here. It's dirty, there's dust, rats. Your suit will get ruined." "I like it here." Julian looked around at the endless shelves that disappeared into the shadows. "It's honest. The past doesn't lie, Sadie. It just gets dusty, waiting for the truth to emerge. The present lies. The people upstairs lie with their fake smiles." He pulled an old metal chair that screeched loudly and sat on the other side of the table, facing her, ignoring the dust. He looked at the organized stacks she had redone. "You did all this in one morning, even with Marcus bothering you?" Sadie froze. How do you know? I know Marcus. He's territorial. Julian took a sip of coffee, his gaze hardening. He came by here, didn't he? Sadie hesitated. Her hand, hidden under the table, gripped the fabric of her skirt until her knuckles turned white. If she told the truth about his aggression, Julian would be furious. But what about the invoices? They were right there, under the folder, inches from Julian's hand. Should she show them now? No, she thought. Not here. Marcus might come back. I need to organize everything, write a report, be absolutely sure. He stopped by. She chose her words carefully. He did an inspection. He knocked over some papers. He said unpleasant things, but he didn't physically hurt me. Julian clenched his jaw. His expression turned grim. He is testing the limits. He thinks I'll forget, that I'll be distracted by grief and let him take control of everything. Julian looked at her bandaged wrist, then into her eyes. I won't forget, Sadie, and I won't let him win. He reached his hand across the table and in an unthinking, almost instinctive gesture, touched Sadie's fingers that held the coffee cup. You are safe here, I promise. No one will take this job from you. You brought something to this bank that has been missing for a long time, humanity. His touch was electric, warm and firm. Sadie felt her face burn. There was a tension in the air, something that should not exist between a cleaner and the bank owner, but which grew in the silence of that damp basement. It was not just gratitude, it was recognition. Two lonely souls meeting in the dark. You are safe here too, Mr. Sterling, she whispered bravely. You can come down whenever you want to escape them. I will keep your secret. Julian smiled, and for a second the sadness in his eyes lessened. Suddenly his cell phone vibrated and rang loudly in his pocket, brutally breaking the spell. He answered, his expression immediately closing off, the CEO mask returning to its place. Yes? No, I said I would not sign the merger today. Are they upstairs? The Japanese investors now? Damn it. He hung up and sighed, standing up. The moment of peace had evaporated. The world upstairs, the glass tower, called him back. International investors, he explained, looking exhausted. I have to go up. It's the gala dinner tonight. The pressure is unbearable. Sadie, keep up the good work. You are bringing order to my chaos. You can count on it, sir. Julian walked to the elevator. Before stepping in, he paused and looked back. Was the coffee good? The best I've ever had. Truly, she said, and it was no exaggeration. He smiled, a genuine smile this time, and the doors closed, taking the light with him. Sadie was alone again in the dim light. Her smile lasted 5 seconds. Then the weight of reality returned with full force. The invoices, the fraud. She quickly pushed aside the folder covering the evidence. There they were. 5 paper time bombs, 5 proofs that the man who threatened to destroy her was a criminal. I need to show this to him. Now, Sadie decided, standing up. I cannot wait. If Marcus finds out, I know. She gathered the bills, folded them carefully to prevent further creasing, and was about to put them in her uniform pocket. But then, a sudden, sharp cramp hit her stomach, doubling her over in pain. The strong, rich coffee, entering an empty stomach since the previous day's meager dinner, had been a shock to her system. Just a minute, she murmured, breaking into a cold sweat, dropping the bills on the table. Just wash my face, quickly. It was a mistake, a fatal error born of innocence. Sadie left the bills on the table, only partially covered by the folder, thinking she was safe in the locked basement where only she and Julian had been. She rushed to the small, grimy restroom located in the dark corner of the archive and closed the door. Seconds later, the silence of the archive was broken, not by the elevator, but by the service door to the fire escape stairs, which was in the dark rear of the archive, a heavy metal door that Sadie had not even noticed. It opened silently, its hinges well-oiled. Marcus did not need an elevator. He had the master keys to the entire building, and he had descended the stairs, step by step, in the dark, driven by paranoia. He entered softly like a cat on a roof. He had not returned to yell. He had returned to observe. Sadie's intelligence bothered him. The way she looked at the boxes bothered him. He reached the desk in absolute silence. He saw Julian's empty coffee cup. Jealousy and disgust twisted his insides. Julian had had coffee with the cleaning lady. He had touched her hand. "Pathetic," Marcus whispered, his lips brushing the word. Then he saw a corner of yellow paper sticking out from under the poorly placed folder. He pulled it out. It read, "Delta Solutions, 150,000 JR." Marcus's blood ran cold in his veins. The world stopped. Then his blood boiled with murderous adrenaline. He pulled out the others. There were 5. She had found it. The gutter rat was not just a cleaning lady. She was an accountant. She had sniffed out the trail. She had put the puzzle together in one afternoon, something the external auditors had not done in 5 years. He looked at the bathroom door. He heard the faucet running, the sound of water flowing. She was inside, alone, defenseless. If he went in there now and... No. There would be blood. There would be noise. Julian would investigate. A cruel, slow, and terrible smile spread across Marcus's face. A much more sadistic plan formed in his mind. If he tore that up now, she would know it was him. She would tell Julian. But what if he took it and let her search? And what if he made her doubt her own sanity? And even better, what if he used that curiosity to set the final trap? He took the 5 invoices. He folded them precisely and put them in the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his rotten heart, feeling the bulk of the paper against his chest. Then she picked up a red correction pen that was on Sadie's desk. She pulled out a blank piece of paper and wrote in aggressive block letters, "Curiosity killed the cat, little Miss Cinders." She left the note exactly where the notes had been, and left through the fire escape, disappearing into the darkness like smoke, without making a single sound. Sadie came out of the restroom, drying her hands on her skirt and splashing water on her pale face. She felt a little better. The adrenaline of the discovery kept her on her feet. She was ready to go up, break into the CEO's office if she had to, and hand the evidence to Julian. She would save the bank and secure her future and her mother's. She arrived at the desk, confident. She reached out her hand to lift the folder and grab the notes. Her hand touched the bare wood. Sadie blinked. Her brain did not process it. She lifted the folder completely. Nothing. She rummaged through the other papers. She looked under the desk. She looked on the floor. No. The whisper came out, shaky, sharp. "I left it here. It was just here. I saw it." Panic rose in her throat like an icy hand. She started throwing boxes onto the floor, searching desperately. Had it fallen? Was she going crazy? Had she imagined everything? Then, amidst the clean wood where the notes should have been, she saw the white paper. The note. She picked up the paper with trembling fingertips. She read the sentence written in red ink that looked like fresh blood. "Curiosity killed the cat, little Miss Cinders." Sadie dropped the paper as if it burned her skin. She let out a muffled scream and recoiled, hitting her back against the metal shelf. She looked into the darkness of the archive, spinning 360 degrees, her eyes wide with terror. The shadows seemed to move. The drips sounded like footsteps. He had been there, while she was washing her face 10 feet away. He had entered the silence, seen everything, read everything, and taken the only weapon she had. He had been close enough to hear her breathing. He knew, and now she had no proof. Nothing. If she told Julian, it would be the word of a recently promoted janitor against that of his chief financial officer and best friend. "I saw some notes, Julian, but they magically disappeared and this note appeared." Julian would think she was crazy, paranoid, or trying to stir up trouble. Marcus would say she forged the note. Sadie felt the tears return, hot and desperate. She was cornered. He was not just going to fire her, he was going to hunt her down. He knew where she lived. The old dusty black desk phone suddenly rang. "Ring!" Sadie screamed, covering her mouth. The shrill sound echoed in the terrifying silence like an air raid siren. She looked at the device. It rang again, and again, insistently. With a trembling hand, sweating cold, she picked up the receiver. "H. Hello? Sadie?" It was Julian's voice. Sadie leaned against the table to keep from falling. "Are you still down there?" he asked. His voice was different, tense, low. I am, Mr. Sterling." She tried to control her voice, but she was breathless, on the verge of a panic attack. "Listen, I need you, now." The urgency in Julian's voice cut through her fear. "Something strange happened with the executive accounts today. A transfer I didn't authorize was blocked by the system. I'm starting to think you were right to be afraid of Marcus. My intuition tells me something is rotten here." Sadie closed her eyes tightly. He was getting suspicious. She wanted to scream, "It was Marcus! He stole the Delta invoices! He just threatened me!" But her throat tightened. What if Marcus was listening on the extension? He controlled security. He could hear everything. If she spoke, he could send someone to her mother's house right now. The note said, "Curiosity killed the cat." "Do you want me to bring up the reports?" she asked, trembling. "No, not here in the office. Walls have ears," Julian whispered. "Tonight, in 3 hours, it's the bank's annual gala dinner at the Grand Plaza Hotel. All the investors will be there, and all the directors, including Marcus. The gala dinner?" Sadie looked at her simple clothes, her dust-stained hands. "Sir, I can't go to a place like that. I'm the cleaner. I don't have the right clothes. I don't know how to behave." "Not today. Today you are not a cleaner. Today you are my eyes," Julian said with a firmness that accepted no refusal. "I need someone I trust completely, someone outside this nest of vipers, to observe who talks to whom, who is nervous, who is lying. I do not trust anyone on my board today, only you. But, sir, the chauffeur will pick you up at your apartment at 7 p.m. There will be a box with a dress in the back seat. It is not a gift, Sadie. It is a mission uniform. Please. I feel they are trying to steal my bank right under my nose, and I am blind. I need your help to see." Sadie looked at the threatening note on the table. The red ink seemed to pulse. If she went, she would be entering the lion's den. Marcus would be there. He would see that she had not given up, but if she did not go, Marcus would continue stealing. He would destroy Julian, the only man who treated her with dignity, and then he would come after her anyway. Her only chance to defend herself was to stay close to Julian, under his protection, and try to find new evidence, a slip-up. It was fight or die. "I will go, sir," she said, her voice gaining new strength born of absolute despair. "I will be there. I will be your eyes. Thank you, Sadie. I knew I could count on you. Until tonight." The phone went silent. Upstairs, in his luxurious office overlooking the illuminated city, Marcus hung up the phone extension with a soft, delicate click. He had heard everything, every breath, every hesitation. He smiled, walking to the crystal bar in his office. He poured himself a shot of aged whiskey. In the inner pocket of his jacket, the stolen invoices burned. But now they were no longer proof of a crime. They were war trophies. They were the bait. "So the little rat goes to the ball," Marcus murmured to the empty room, toasting his own reflection in the window. "Perfect. Julian just made everything easier. He will bring her straight to the slaughterhouse. He picked up his personal cell phone, a burner phone he used for his dirty dealings. He dialed a number not in his contacts. "Hello? It's me," Marcus said, looking at the city lights below, feeling like an untouchable god. "Change of plans for tonight. The cleaner will be at the party. I want you to bring that." A pause from the other end of the line. "Yes, Mrs. Van Houten's diamond necklace, the one insured for $2 million. "Bring the original." Marcus laughed, a terrible sound. "No, you idiot. We are not selling it. We are going to perform a magic trick. The necklace will disappear from the old woman's neck during the toast, and it will magically appear inside Cinderella's purse. Let's see if Julian will continue protecting her immaculate honesty when the police drag her away in handcuffs for grand larceny in front of all the press." He hung up and downed his whiskey in one gulp. "Tonight, Sadie Bennett. The clock will strike midnight much earlier for you, and this time there won't even be a glass slipper left to tell the tale." Downstairs, in the damp, silent basement, Sadie tucked the threatening note deep inside her purse. She did not know about the necklace. She did not know about the deadly trap being set. She only knew she was at war, and that she needed to save the man who had given her a warm cup of coffee and looked at her like a human being. She turned off the records room light, plunging the labyrinth into darkness, and walked to the elevator with her head held high. The hunt had begun. The box arrived at 7 p.m. sharp, brought by the chauffeur in a cap and white gloves who seemed afraid to ring the doorbell of the simple house, whose peeling wall displayed the scars of years without renovation. The black car, parked on the narrow, potholed street, attracted curious glances from neighbors in their windows, but the chauffeur maintained a rigid posture, delivered the package, and left as if fleeing a war zone. When Sadie took the box to the kitchen and opened the black velvet lid on the wobbly table covered with a plastic tablecloth, the contrast was stark. Inside the box, a dream rested. Ms. Ruth, lying in bed in the next room, let out a faint sigh drawn by the glow escaping from the kitchen. "What is that, my dear?" Her mother's voice was a mere whisper. "It looks like you brought a piece of heaven into the house." Sadie touched the fabric with her fingertips, fearing her bleach-hardened hands might tear the silk. It was a long dress, a deep navy blue, almost black, the color of the ocean at night. The fabric flowed through her hands like liquid water, cold and soft. It was discreet, without vulgar necklines or excessive sparkle, but the cut screamed money and power in every invisible seam. Next to the dress was a pair of low-heeled, comfortable shoes and a simple note, handwritten with a fountain pen. "So you feel like a queen, not a spy. Tonight, Cinderella has no curfew. J." Sadie felt a lump in her throat. Julian had not sent a uniform. He had sent an armor of dignity. She went to the cramped bathroom, where the shower eternally dripped. She took a cold shower to save gas, scrubbing her skin until it was red, trying to remove any trace of cleaning smell. Putting on that outfit was a military operation. She was afraid to let the silk touch the damp, moldy bathroom walls. When she finally zipped it up and looked at herself in the rust-stained mirror, the air left her lungs. She did not recognize the woman staring back at her. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, revealing her long neck. The light makeup, applied with the little she had left from years ago, hid the deep, dark circles from sleepless nights. The dress molded her body respectfully, giving her a posture she did not even know she possessed. She did not look like a cleaning lady. She looked strong, dangerous. "You are beautiful, my daughter," Ms. Ruth whispered from the bathroom doorway, leaning on the frame to keep from falling. "You look like a princess." "I am not a princess, Mom." Sadie helped her mother back to bed, feeling the fever on her skin. "I am a soldier. I'm going there to fight for our roof over our heads." "Be careful with these rich people, Sadie." Her mother held her hand with surprising strength. They smile with perfect teeth, but they bite with their souls. They do not like it when we enter their world without permission. Sadie kissed her mother's sweaty forehead, feeling the weight of those words. "I will be back soon, Mom, with victory." The armored car took her to the Grand Plaza Hotel in the city's upscale downtown. The ride was silent, the cold air conditioning contrasting with the heat of the projects. Sadie looked out the tinted window, watching the world change. Houses turned into buildings, trash disappeared from the sidewalks, lights grew brighter. She was crossing the invisible border that separated the two worlds. The hotel entrance was a red carpet lined with velvet ropes and photographers whose flashes exploded like blinding lightning in the night. Limousines stopped, disgorging women in dresses that cost more than Sadie's entire life, and men who decided the fate of thousands with a phone call. Sadie felt her stomach churn. The panic of being discovered, of being branded an imposter, almost made her ask the chauffeur to turn back. She wanted to shrink into the leather seat and disappear, but the door opened, and Julian was there. He waited for her at the foot of the marble staircase, ignoring the reporters shouting his name. His black tuxedo fit him perfectly, custom made, but his face was tense, his jaw clenched. He looked like his own bodyguard. When he saw her get out of the car, however, the tension broke for a second. He blinked, surprised, as if he had taken a soft punch. He looked her up and down, and for a moment there was no bank, there was no fraud, there was no Marcus. There was only a stunning woman. "Sadie," he said, his voice hoarse, offering his arm, "you look appropriate." He quickly corrected himself, maintaining professionalism in front of the cameras, but his eyes said something else. They said, "Thank you." "I am trembling, Mr. Sterling," she whispered, accepting his arm. His muscle was rigid as stone under the thin fabric of his suit jacket. "I feel like everyone knows I do not belong here." "Breathe," he whispered close to her ear as they ascended the steps under the flashes. "Nobody here knows who you are. Money buys silence and appearances. To them you are a mysterious external consultant. Keep your head high. If anyone asks, you work with hidden asset auditing. It is not a lie." They entered the ballroom. The impact was physical, like stepping onto another planet. The scent of French perfumes, fresh lilies, polishing wax and champagne was so strong and sweet it made her dizzy. The ceiling was dominated by 3 gigantic crystal chandeliers, cascades of light that poured a golden glow over 300 people conversing in a polished, restrained murmur. Sadie felt tiny, a grain of sand in a glass palace. The music of a string quartet floated in the air, covering the rot Julian said existed there. "The mission," Julian reminded her softly, lightly squeezing her arm, guiding her along the edge of the ballroom, away from the center where the sharks swam. "I will have to greet the Japanese investors. They demand protocol. I want you to circulate. Stay near the bar, near the side tables. Be invisible. Observe Marcus." "Where is he?" Julian subtly pointed with his chin without turning his head. At the back of the ballroom, near a Greek marble column, stood Marcus. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand and an unlit cigar in the other. He was laughing loudly with a group of grey-haired men in grey suits. He looked like the host of the party, the king of the world. He exuded confidence and arrogance, but his eyes did not laugh. They swept the ballroom like military radar, cold and calculating. And then the radar stopped on Sadie. Marcus's smile did not waver, but it froze. He saw her. He saw the dress. He saw her on Julian's arm. He raised his glass in a mocking, almost imperceptible toast in her direction. A silent toast of welcome to hell. A cold shiver ran down Sadie's spine. He knew. He was waiting. The note, "Curiosity killed the cat," burned in her memory. "Go," Julian said, reluctantly releasing her arm. "And Sadie, please, do not accept drinks from anyone. Do not eat anything you did not see being served. "I will be your eyes, Mr. Sterling." Julian plunged into the crowd, immediately surrounded by businessmen. Sadie was left alone in the jungle. She began to walk, trying to imitate the languid posture of the women around her. She felt like an imposter with every step. Her heel, though low, seemed to make a different sound on the wooden floor. Each time someone looked at her dress, she thought they saw the department store tag etched into her soul, that they smelled the musty odor of her apartment. She heard fragments of conversations as she passed. "I bought the island, but the yacht does not fit in the harbor. I fired 300 today. The stock went up 2 points. She aged poorly, poor thing. Look at that neck." It was a world of polished surfaces and sharp knives. She positioned herself near a decorative palm tree in a gold pot, from where she could see Marcus without being seen. He was talking to the waiter. He was not an ordinary waiter. He was a thin man, with a fine scar on his left eyebrow, who nodded nervously at every word Marcus whispered. Marcus slid his hand inside his jacket, took out something small, and slipped it into the waiter's vest pocket. Money, a note, drugs. Sadie narrowed her eyes, focusing. This is suspicious, she thought. The chief financial officer paying the waiter in the middle of the party? I have to tell Julian as soon as he gets rid of the Japanese investors. But before she could move, a strange commotion began in the center of the ballroom, attracting everyone's attention. An elderly woman covered in furs and jewels despite the heat spoke loudly, gesturing with an empty glass. It was Mrs. Van Houten, the widow of a steel magnate and the bank's largest individual shareholder. "Where is Julian?" she complained, laughing with a shrill voice like someone who had too much to drink. "I want to show off my new toy. He needs to see where his dividend is being spent." Around her flabby neck, something shone that outshone even the chandeliers, a necklace of diamonds and blue sapphires, stones the size of quail eggs. It seemed to weigh 1 kilogram. Light struck the stones and scattered rainbows across the walls. Sadie watched, fascinated and horrified. That necklace would pay for her house, her street, the entire neighborhood, and there would still be enough left over to build a hospital. It was obscene. Marcus leaned away from the column and walked toward the old woman like a snake slithering through the grass. He kissed her hand with an exaggerated bow. "Mrs. Van Houten, you are radiant like an empress, but be careful. Those sapphires attract dangerous gazes." "Oh, Marcus, stop being a bore. We have security, don't we? What do I pay you for?" "The best money can buy," Marcus said, smiling, and his eyes darted away for a second. 1 exact second. His eyes met the waiter with the scar across the ballroom. A subtle nod, almost invisible. The waiter picked up a heavy silver tray full of crystal champagne flutes and began to cross the ballroom. He walked quickly, focused, but he did not go towards Mrs. Van Houten. He went towards Sadie. Sadie saw the waiter coming towards her, cutting a path between the tables. She tried to step back, make way, be polite as she had always been taught. She was leaning against a tall bistro table where she had left her small velvet handbag, borrowed along with the dress, ajar to get a tissue as her hands were cold and sweaty. The waiter came close, too close. He looked into her eyes. There was a silent apology there, and then he tripped over nothing. "Watch out!" someone yelled. Everything happened in slow motion for Sadie. The tray tilted. Gravity took over. 3, 4 crystal glasses filled with golden, icy, sticky liquid fell directly onto Sadie's shoulder, lap, and chest. The thermal shock was brutal. The silk dress instantly turned icy, clinging to her skin like a cold second skin. The sound of glass shattering on the floor, crash, made the entire ballroom fall silent. The music stopped. 300 heads turned at once. Oh my God, forgive me, madam, forgive me. I am so clumsy." The waiter seemed desperate, grabbing cloth napkins, waving his hands near her, invading her personal space, wiping the table near her purse. It is all right. It was an accident. Please, Sadie stammered, humiliated, trying to clean herself, feeling the liquid run down her back, smelling the strong scent of alcohol. She was soaked, sticky, ridiculous. The Cinderella dream had turned into a wet nightmare in seconds. Everyone was watching. The wealthy women whispered, covering their mouths with fans. "Who is that clumsy woman? What a waste of champagne." In the confusion, as she shook her dress and tried not to cry, and as the waiter frantically wiped the table with a napkin, no one saw his hand move with the speed of a trained illusionist. No one saw the bluish gleam slide from his jacket sleeve. No one saw the necklace, which he already had in his pocket from the start, a replica or the original stolen earlier. No, it was the original, stolen in a sleight of hand seconds before Mrs. Van Houten noticed, slide into the open slit of Sadie's purse. I'll clean it, the waiter insisted, pushing the purse further to the center of the table, closing the clasp with a soft, audible click. Julien emerged from the crowd, pushing his way through with his shoulders, his face tight with concern. What happened here, Sadie? It was an accident, sir. I tripped on the rug. The waiter backed away, trembling, his hands raised. Julien looked at Sadie, wet, shivering from cold and shame, huddled like a wounded animal. He did not ask about the dress. He immediately took off his own tuxedo jacket, remaining only in his shirt, and placed it over her shoulders, covering the stain and her exposure. Are you all right? Did you cut yourself with the glass? No, I'm just ashamed. So ashamed, she whispered, her eyes full of warm tears. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I ruined everything. I shouldn't have come. I'm a disaster. It was an accident. It is not your fault. Come on, I will take you to a private room to dry that. I will order a car to take you. That is enough for today. Julien placed a protective hand on her back to guide her. Sadie picked up her purse from the table. It felt a little heavier, but her hands were trembling so much from cold and nervousness that she did not notice the difference in grams. They took 3 steps toward the exit. And then the scream. My necklace! They stole my necklace! The voice of Mrs. Van Houten tore through the ballroom's air conditioning like a rusty razor. The ballroom stopped. It froze. The old lady had her hands on her bare neck, her eyes wide with real panic. The clasp had been opened with surgical skill. The $2 million jewel had vanished from her body without her feeling it. Close the doors. Marcus's voice thundered through the sound system, taking command instantly, as if he had been waiting for his cue. Security! Code red! Nobody leaves! The double doors of the ballroom slammed shut, locked from the outside. 4 armed security guards, hulking men in black suits, positioned themselves at the exit, crossing their arms. Panic began to bubble among the guests. Murmurs, accusations, fear of scandal. Quiet, everyone! Marcus climbed onto the small orchestra stage, taking the microphone from the singer. He looked like a general on a battlefield. We've had a high-value theft. Mrs. Van Houten's necklace was just stolen. The thief is in the ballroom. Julien stopped, holding Sadie. He looked at Marcus on the stage. His eyes narrowed. This is theatre, Julien thought. Marcus hates Van Houten. He isn't worried. He's excited. We will search everyone, Marcus announced, his voice echoing. No one leaves here with our shareholders' assets, starting with the service team. And, he paused dramatically, his eyes meeting Julien's across the ballroom, with the guests not on the official security list. 2 security guards walked straight toward Julien. The crowd parted, creating an isolated corridor around the couple. Mr. Sterling, one of the security guards said, uncomfortable but firm. External insurance company protocol. Jewelry valued over $1 million requires a full search. We need to search your companion. Have you lost your mind? Julien growled, physically placing himself in front of Sadie, transforming into a human shield. She is with me. She is my personal guest. Do you know who I am?" "Exactly, Julian." Marcus's voice came from behind. He had stepped down from the stage and walked over to them as the crowd watched. "She is your personal guest, a woman nobody knows, who has no last name, who has no printed invitation, and who was standing 6 feet from Mrs. Van Houten when the necklace disappeared." "This is ridiculous, Marcus," Julian said, his voice low and dangerous, trying to contain his outburst. "You know who she is. You know she is honest. Stop this circus now." "I cannot stop the insurance company's protocol, Julian," Marcus said loudly, washing his hands with false helplessness, shifting the blame to bureaucracy so the shareholders would hear. "If you prevent the search, the policy is cancelled. And I know she is a cleaner you dressed up as a princess to play Pygmalion." A collective gasp of shock swept through the ballroom. "A cleaner?" Sadie felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The word hung in the air like an insult, like a curse. The women in jewels looked at her with instant disgust, as if she were a contagious disease. She cringed inside Julian's jacket, wishing she could die. "A woman in debt," Marcus continued, relentless, "with an eviction notice for tomorrow, desperate for money, the perfect criminal profile." "If she's honest, Julian," Marcus smiled, a wolf's grin that cornered its prey, "she won't mind opening her purse. Will she?" Julian looked at Sadie. He wanted to say, "Don't open it." He wanted to forcibly remove her, to use his power as owner. But the press was filming. Cell phones were raised. If he refused the search, he would destroy her reputation forever. It would look like he was covering for a thief, a criminal lover. He was cornered by his own ethics and the external rules that Marcus manipulated so well. Sadie looked at Julian. She saw doubt in his eyes. Not doubt about her honesty, but doubt about how to save her without destroying her. She saw the fear. She took a deep breath. The air smelled of fear and expensive perfume. She had nothing to fear. Her purse only contained her old cell phone, a cheap lipstick, and the threatening note she had kept as evidence. "I have nothing to hide," Sadie said, her voice trembling but audible in the silence of the ballroom. She stepped forward, moving out from Julian's protection. She placed her handbag on the nearest bistro table, where broken glasses still glittered on the floor. "You can look," she said, unfastening the clasp with icy fingers. Marcus crossed his arms, waiting, his smile growing millimeter by millimeter. Sadie turned the purse upside down and shook it. The cell phone fell with a dull thud. The lipstick rolled. The note fluttered down. And then something heavy, cold, and incredibly shiny slid out from the velvet lining. Clack! The sound of the diamond and sapphire necklace hitting the table's wood was the loudest sound in the world, louder than a gunshot. The light from the chandeliers struck the blue stones, reflecting guilt in all directions. Sadie looked at the jewel. Her brain stopped. It made no sense. It was a glitch in the matrix. It was a nightmare. How did that get there? She had not touched anyone. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, deadly. "Oh my God," someone whispered in the crowd. "Thief!" Mrs. Van Houten screamed, breaking the spell, pointing her trembling, ring-laden finger. "She stole it! That dirty woman stole my necklace!" Sadie recoiled, her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with pure horror. The world spun. "No, it's not mine. I don't know how." She looked at Julian, desperate, pleading. "Mr. Sterling, I swear, I didn't take it. Someone put it there. It was the waiter." Julian was pale as a corpse. He looked at the necklace, then at Sadie. He was paralyzed. The physical evidence was there, shining, undeniable, obscene. His logical banker's mind short-circuited. How? I was on her side. Doubt for a fraction of a second infected his heart, and that fraction of a second was fatal. "I warned you, Julian." Marcus's voice broke the trance. It was soft, victorious, like poisoned honey. Once trash, always trash. You put a fox in the henhouse and it ate the chickens. That was planted, Julian finally yelled, waking from the shock, adrenaline exploding. He grabbed the arm of the security guard who was advancing to touch Sadie. Nobody touches her. This is a setup. Marcus set this up. Did I set this up? Marcus laughed incredulously, turning to the audience like a Shakespearean actor. I've been on stage for 10 minutes, Julian. The necklace was around Mrs. Van Houten's neck. This young woman bumped into the waiter, created a commotion, a classic technique of international pickpockets, and the necklace is in her bag. How long will you defend the indefensible? Are you going to sink the bank along with your thieving mistress? The word mistress was the final nail in the coffin of Julian's credibility with the shareholders. Arrest her, Marcus ordered the officers, his voice like steel. And call the police station. We have an open and shut case of aggravated theft. 2 police officers who were providing external security for the event ran into the lobby. They were not bank employees. They were the law, and the law saw a stolen jewel in a poor woman's bag. Hands behind your back, ma'am, the officer said, spinning Sadie with unnecessary force. No! Julian, please! I didn't do anything! Sadie screamed as the cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists, right over the bandage covering the injury Marcus had inflicted the day before. The pain was excruciating, both physical and emotional. Julian tried to step forward, ready to assault the officer if he had to, but 3 other hotel security guards blocked his path, forming a human barrier, protecting him from committing a crime of obstruction of justice. Let her go! I own this bank! I order you to release her! Julian roared, struggling, but his voice held no power against the image of that necklace gleaming on the table. Sadie was dragged through the ballroom. The walk of shame. People moved away as if she had the bubonic plague, pulling their dresses and purses away. Camera flashes burst into her face, wet with tears and smudged mascara. She saw faces contorted with disgust and contempt. She saw Mrs. Van Houten retrieving the necklace from the table and frantically wiping it with a handkerchief, as if contact with Sadie's purse had contaminated it forever. Marcus walked beside her as she was led to the exit, maintaining a calm pace. He leaned close to her ear, where only she could hear amidst the shouting. I told you curiosity killed the cat, little Miss Cinders, he whispered, his breath warm on her ear. Enjoy the holding cell. It is cold and damp, and do not worry about your mother. She will miss you when the bailiff throws her out on the street tomorrow morning. Sadie sobbed, a sound like a wounded animal, and her legs gave out. The officers had to drag her by the arms to the revolving door. Julian stood in the middle of the ballroom, watching the woman who had saved him, the only woman who had made him feel something in 3 years, being led away like a dirty criminal. He looked at Marcus, who was now comforting Mrs. Van Houten, being applauded by some investors for his speed and firmness in resolving the crisis. Julian felt such a deep, cold, and absolute hatred that his hands stopped trembling. The world went silent. He looked at the table where the purse had been emptied. The cell phone was there, the lipstick was there, and the note. No one had noticed the small, crumpled white paper amidst the commotion over the $2 million diamond. It was trash to them. Julian walked to the table, ignoring the guests' looks of pity and judgment. He picked up the paper. He read the red ink, the aggressive handwriting he recognized from internal memos. Curiosity killed the cat, little Miss Cinders. Julian crumpled the paper in his hand until his knuckles turned white, until his fingernail pierced his palm. It was not doubt he felt now. It was certainty. It was clarity. He turned and ran out of the ballroom, pushing past the security guards who tried to stop him, not after the police, but toward the service elevators, toward his office on the 20th floor, toward the one thing Marcus, in his supreme arrogance, had forgotten. Marcus thought he controlled everything. But he had forgotten that Julian was a man who had tragically lost his wife and men like that become paranoid. Marcus did not know that, after Eleanor's death, Julian had installed an analog, independent and hidden surveillance system, focused only on his office and the executive hallway, a system Marcus could not erase because he did not even know it existed. As Sadie was unceremoniously thrown into the back seat of the police cruiser, smelling cold metal, vomit and despair, watching the blue and red lights spin and her life end, Julian entered his dark office, locked the door, and turned on the secret monitor hidden behind a painting. The night was not over. Justice had been silenced, handcuffed, and taken away. But the war had just been declared, and there would be no prisoners. The holding cell at the 4th Precinct Station had no windows to the outside world. There was only a thick, peeling and rusted iron grate that opened onto a long, dimly lit hallway, lit by a fluorescent light that hummed incessantly, like a dying fly trapped in Sadie's ear. The smell was a physical assault, a dense, nauseating mixture of mold, dried urine, old sweat, and the metallic scent of human despair accumulated over decades. Sadie was sitting in the darkest corner of a cold concrete bench that sucked the warmth from her body through her thin silk dress. She hugged her knees, trying to make herself small, trying to disappear into the shadows. The navy blue dress, which hours earlier had seemed like a queen's armor under the crystal chandeliers, was now unrecognizable. It was wrinkled, stained with black dust from the paddy wagon floor, and marked with dried champagne that smelled sour. The expensive fabric seemed like a cruel joke in that place. She was no longer Cinderella. The carriage had turned into a pumpkin, and the prince had been left behind, powerless. She was just another number in the penal system, another booked thief. Beside her, on the cold floor, a woman with a face scarred by deep marks slept a restless sleep, muttering curses and struggling against invisible nightmares. On the other side of the bars, down the hall, police officers laughed loudly, told jokes and drank coffee, completely indifferent to the tragedy unfolding just a few feet away. For them, it was just another Tuesday. Sadie closed her eyes tightly, but the tears kept flowing, hot and silent, tracing paths on the dirt of her face. "Mom," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken from crying so much in silence. "Forgive me, Mom. I failed." The image of Ms. Ruth invaded her mind with the force of a punch. She imagined her mother waking up alone in the dark house, calling for her and hearing only silence. She imagined the bailiff knocking on the door in the morning, not gently, but with the eviction notice in hand. She imagined her mother coughing, breathless, without medicine, being thrown onto the cold sidewalk with the few broken pieces of furniture they had, while the neighbors watched with pity. Marcus had won. He had not only destroyed her, he had erased her future and her mother's life. The note, "Curiosity killed the cat," echoed in her mind like a death sentence repeated on a loop. She had tried to be more than a cleaner. She had tried to fly too close to the sun, guided by Julian, and now she was burned to ashes, handcuffed and alone. The metallic sound of keys rattling against the bars made her jump. "Hey, crime princess." The corrections officer, a corpulent man with tired eyes, hit the iron with his baton. "Visitor." Sadie slowly raised her head, her heart painfully pounding against her ribs. Could it be her mother? No, her mother couldn't walk. Could it be the bailiff to serve her right there? "Visitor?" she asked, her voice failing. "Your defense attorney is here, and he brought the heavy cavalry." The iron gate opened with a sharp screech of metal against metal, a sound that made Sadie's teeth ache. Meanwhile, across town, on the 20th floor of the bank tower, the silence was different. It was not the silence of fear, but that of lethal concentration. The darkness of the CEO's office was broken only by the bluish glow of an old monitor, hidden behind a wooden panel on the wall. Julian was sitting in the leather chair, his tuxedo shirt still open at the collar, his tie discarded on the floor. His eyes were fixed on the screen, red with fatigue, but focused like lasers. He had not blinked for minutes. His breathing was short, controlled, the breathing of a sniper about to pull the trigger. On the grainy screen, the security footage from the hidden camera, installed inside an old wall clock in the hallway, a relic that Marcus never had removed, showed the naked truth. It was the footage from 3 hours before the ball. The timestamp in the corner of the screen blinked, 7:42 p.m. The image showed Marcus exiting the private elevator. He looked around, paranoid, checking if he was alone. But he did not look at the clock on the wall. He walked to Julian's office door. He took a key from his pocket, his master key. He entered. Julian fast-forwarded the recording to the office's internal camera, hidden in a fake smoke detector. The image switched to the office interior. Marcus went directly to the safe camouflaged behind Eleanor's painting. He typed the emergency password, a password he had as financial director for crisis situations. The safe opened smoothly. Marcus reached in and pulled out a blue velvet box. He opened it. Mrs. Van Houten's diamond and sapphire necklace gleamed in the dim light of the room. The bank kept VIP clients' jewelry in the CEO's office safe before gala events for maximum security. It was standard procedure that Marcus knew better than anyone. Marcus placed the necklace in the inner pocket of his jacket, patting the fabric to secure it. He closed the safe. He smiled at nothing. A smile from someone who believed he had committed the perfect crime, a checkmate on the king. "I got you," Julian whispered to the screen, his voice trembling with pure hatred, a guttural sound. "I got you, you bastard." But he did not stop there. The rage demanded more than just clearing Sadie of the theft. It demanded total destruction. He remembered what Sadie had said in the car, with that simple wisdom. "The numbers tell a story, Mr. Sterling. If we put them in the right order, they speak." He remembered the Delta Solutions invoices that Marcus mentioned finding in the trash when Sadie was arrested, trying to discredit her as crazy. Julian accessed the bank's financial system, not with his CEO password, which was monitored by the IT team which Marcus controlled. He used the root audit password that his wife Eleanor, who had been the chief technology officer before she died, had taught him years ago. "In case you need to see what no one wants to show, my love," she had said. He typed the password. The system accepted it. He typed into the search bar, "Delta Solutions." The screen filled with red lines. Hundreds of them. Monthly transfers of 150,000 starting 5 years ago. Destination, an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Hidden ultimate beneficiary, MT Holdings. Authorization IP address, CFO's office. Marcus Thorne. Sadie was right. The cleaner Marcus despised had discovered in an afternoon of manual labor what the external audit, paid a fortune, had not seen in 5 years of corporate blindness. She was not a thief. She was the savior of that bank. She was brilliant, and they had thrown her into a cold holding cell to rot. Julian felt a warm tear stream down his face. Not from sadness, but from fury and pride. He picked up the red phone from his desk. He dialed a number he had not used in a long time, reserved for national emergencies. "Hello, Attorney Weiss?" Julian said, his voice firm as tempered steel. "Yes, wake up the duty judge. I do not care what time it is. I want an immediate habeas corpus and an arrest warrant. Now." The target's name? Marcus Thorne. Reason? Aggravated theft, bank fraud and conspiracy. Bring in the cavalry. The sun rose grey over the city, illuminating the imposing glass facade of the bank as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. At the police station, Sadie signed the release papers with a trembling hand, barely able to hold the pen. She still could not believe it. The defense attorney, an elegant man with an expensive leather briefcase, treated her with a strange reverence, almost as if she were royalty. "Mr. Sterling is outside, Miss Bennett. All charges have been dropped." The officer offered formal apologies for the regrettable procedural error. Sadie walked out the front door of the police station, blinking against the morning light. The air was cold, polluted, but it smelled of freedom. Julian was leaning against the hood of the black armored car. He was still wearing the clothes from the night before, his face unshaven, ravaged by exhaustion and tension. But when he saw her, he pushed off the car and ran. He did not greet her as a boss. He did not shake her hand. He embraced her, a strong, desperate embrace, violent in its need. He buried his face in her neck, breathing deeply, not caring about the smell of the cell, the dirt on her dress, or the stares of the officers at the door. "Forgive me," he whispered into her hair, his voice choked. "Forgive me for not stopping them then. Forgive me for hesitating. Forgive me for letting you spend the night in that hell." Sadie began to cry, the relief breaking the floodgate of strength she had held for hours. She clutched his shirt with her dirty hands. "I thought I was going to die there, Mr. Sterling. I thought I would never see my mother again. I was so scared." "Never again." Julian held her face between his hands, looking into her eyes with frightening intensity. "No one will ever touch you again. I swear on Eleanor's memory. It's over, Sadie. The nightmare is over. Marcus, he said he was going to evict my mother today. I need to go home now. She has been alone since last night." Despair returned to Sadie's eyes. "Calm down." Julian held her by the shoulders, looking at her tenderly. "I sent a medical team and a private nurse to your apartment as soon as I learned of your arrest. Your mother is being medicated and cared for right now. She is safe. I would never leave her alone." Sadie let out a deep sigh, her legs almost giving out from relief. Julian had thought of everything. "Thank you." "Oh my God, thank you," she whispered. "Marcus will wish he had been arrested last night along with you," Julian said, and there was a darkness in his eyes that made Sadie shiver. "Let's go. The car will take you home." "No." Sadie wiped her tears with the back of her hand, smudging her face with mascara, but a new, cold, hard strength emerged in her chest. The fire of injustice burned stronger than her exhaustion. "I'm not going home now." "Sadie, you need to rest. I want to go with you." Sadie lifted her chin, her eyes shining. "To the bank." "To the bank?" "He humiliated me in front of everyone, Julian. He said I was trash, that I was a gutter rat. I want to see his face when the truth comes out. I will not hide at home while he falls. I want to be there." Julian looked at her. He saw the transformation. The frightened girl had stayed in the holding cell. The woman standing there was a warrior. He smiled. A fierce, proud, dangerous smile. "Then let's go. The board meeting starts in an hour, and Marcus thinks he will be named interim president today. Let's ruin his party." The city central bank was a monument to financial power. On the top floor, in the glass-walled conference room overlooking the entire city, 12 men in grey suits and grave expressions were seated around a 30-foot-long mahogany table. Marcus was at the head of the table, in Julian's chair. He looked fresh, rested, victorious. He had shaved, changed his suit. He was drinking imported mineral water and smiling with false modesty at the worried shareholders. "Gentlemen, it is a tragedy, of course," Marcus said, his voice sorrowful and theatrical. "Julian had an obvious nervous breakdown. Untreated grief, you know. He mixed medication, alcohol, and ended up getting emotionally involved with this low-class criminal. The necklace scandal was the last straw. He is not psychologically fit to manage the bank. As chief financial officer and his personal friend for 20 years, I regretfully offer to temporarily assume the presidency until..." The double solid oak door of the conference room burst open with a violent crash, hitting the side walls. All heads turned at once. Julian entered. He did not appear broken. He did not appear depressed. He looked like an electrical storm contained in human form. And beside him, head held high, still wearing the wrinkled and stained blue dress from the night before, with disheveled hair but with the gaze of a vengeful queen, stood Sadie. Marcus jumped to his feet, the chair scraping across the floor with a sharp screech. His smile wavered and died. "Julian!" He tried to regain control, but his voice came out shrill. "What is the meaning of this? You cannot just walk in here. You are suspended, and... My God, what is this thief doing inside my bank? Security! Call security!" "Sit down, Marcus," Julian said. His voice was not loud, but it resonated in the acoustic room like thunder, vibrating the windows. "I do not take orders from you. You are a risk to the institution. The board has already voted on my appointment. The board voted based on lies." Julian walked to the table, ignoring the shocked stares at his wrinkled clothes. He threw a thick folder of documents onto the mahogany center with a heavy thud. "And based on the omission of an ongoing multi-million-dollar crime." The shareholders began to murmur, picking up the papers. Marcus paled, looking at the folder. He recognized the Delta Solutions logo. "This is delusion. He is insane, gentlemen. He forged documents. Call the police now." "The police are already here, Marcus." Julian pointed to the open door. The FBI special agent in charge entered, accompanied by 4 armed tactical agents. The atmosphere in the room dropped to absolute zero. Marcus backed up against the glass wall, cornered like a rat. "This is an abuse of power. I am the president of this bank. You can't—" "You are a thief," Sadie said. It was the first time she spoke. Her voice was clear, firm, cutting through the silent room's air. She stepped forward, facing the man who had tormented her, who had called her trash, who had tried to destroy her life. "You stole $150,000 a month for 5 years through the shell company Delta Solutions." Sadie recited the data from memory, looking into his eyes. "You forged authorization signatures. You used dead records as your personal dumping ground because you were too arrogant and thought no one inferior like a janitor would be smart enough to look there and understand the numbers." Marcus looked at her with pure hatred, veins bulging in his neck. "Shut up, you filthy janitor. Who will believe you? I have prestige. I have history. You are a projects resident who stole a necklace. And I have the video." Julian interrupted, pulling a remote control from his pocket. He pointed to the giant projection screen on the wall. The image appeared, grainy, black and white, but undeniable. Marcus opening the safe, Marcus taking the necklace, Marcus smiling at the crime. A gasp of horror went through the shareholders' table. Mrs. Van Houten, who was present in the corner of the room as Marcus's guest of honor, brought her hand to her mouth, shocked. "And there's more." Julian pressed the button again. An image from an internal security camera appeared. Not from the hallway, but from inside the dead records room, hidden in a false ventilation box that Julian had secretly installed the night before Sadie's visit. The image showed Marcus entering the archive while Sadie was in the restroom. It showed him taking the invoices from Sadie's desk. It showed him writing the note on a piece of paper and leaving it on the desk with the red pen, the proof of harassment and threat. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a career, a reputation, and a lifetime of lies crumbling in real time. Marcus looked at the screen, then at the shareholders who now looked at him with disgust, then at Julian. He saw that he was finished. There was no way out. There was no rhetoric or bribe that could explain it. The FBI special agent in charge gave a curt signal. The agents moved forward. "Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest for aggravated theft, fraud, falsification of documents, threats and embezzlement of funds," the FBI special agent in charge recited as he forcefully pulled Marcus's arms behind his back. "No! Let me go! Do you know who I am? I am Marcus Thorne!" Marcus began to scream, completely losing his composure. He struggled, his Italian suit tearing at the shoulder. The man who had humiliated Sadie in the hallway, who had squeezed her wrist until it almost broke, was now being bent over the mahogany table, his face pressed against the polished wood where minutes before he had reigned. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was music to Sadie's ears. Better than any symphony. The agents lifted Marcus. He was red, sweating, his disheveled hair falling over his eyes, snot running from his nose. He looked at Sadie. There was no more arrogance. There was only animal fear and the supreme humiliation of having been brought down by the person he considered an insect. "Sadie," he whispered, his voice broken, pleading. "Please, I can explain. We can make a deal. I have money. I'll pay for your mother's treatment. I'll buy a house for you. Tell them to stop." Sadie looked him in the eyes. She felt no pity. She felt only justice. "My mother does not need your dirty money, Marcus," she said, calm and deadly. "And I am no longer your little Miss Cinders. The clock has struck midnight for you. And in your carriage now, the windows have bars." Julian signaled the officers. "Get this trash out of my office." Marcus was dragged out, screaming, crying and flailing like a spoiled child. He was led down the central hallway, where all the bank employees, secretaries, assistants, and yes, the cleaners who stopped cleaning to watch, stared open-mouthed. The humiliation was public, total, and irreversible. He left the building not as a president, but as a prisoner, under the flashes of the same press he had summoned to destroy Sadie the night before. The conference room fell into a stunned silence. The shareholders looked at Julian and Sadie, ashamed for having believed the farce, not knowing what to say. Julian walked over to Sadie and took her hand, raising it in front of all the billionaires present. "Gentlemen," Julian said to the shareholders, his voice firm, "this woman saved this bank from moral and financial bankruptcy. She found in the dead records what all of you, with your international MBAs and million-dollar salaries, failed to see in Excel spreadsheets." He looked at Sadie with undisguised admiration. "From today on, Sadie Bennett is no longer a contract employee, nor from dead records. She will be the new head of internal audit and compliance for the bank, with a full scholarship to finish college and full investigative powers over any board of directors. Does anyone object?" No one dared to breathe, much less object. Mrs. Van Houten began to applaud timidly, and soon everyone followed her. "Excellent. The meeting is over." Julian pulled Sadie out of the room, away from that world of hypocrisy and grey suits. They went to the CEO's office. The room where everything had begun, with a scream and a broken wrist. Now it was calm. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, washing over the room. Sadie felt her legs tremble. The adrenaline was subsiding, leaving only deep exhaustion and relief. She sat on the leather couch, worn out. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice small, returning to the girl who only wanted to protect her mother. "It is over," Julian confirmed, sitting beside her. He took an envelope from the drawer. "But there is something urgent we need to resolve." He handed the envelope to her. Inside, there was the stamped and paid contract for her house debt, and his personal check with the value that Sadie had to count the zeros. "This is not charity," Julian said quickly, before she could refuse. "This is your performance bonus for recovering 15 million in embezzled funds from Marcus. It is the bank's standard commission. It is yours by right, Sadie. Your mother will never again have to choose between eating and breathing." Sadie looked at the paper. The house was hers. The money was real. The security was real. She started crying again, but this time they were tears of healing, of a ton of weight lifting from her back. Julian approached. He hesitated for a moment, then took his wife's letter from the inside pocket of his jacket. The yellowed, crumpled paper that Sadie had rescued from the trash and protected with her own body. "Eleanor wrote here," Julian read softly, running his finger over his wife's handwriting. Promise you will seek the light again, that you will let someone take care of you when the darkness comes." He looked at Sadie, his eyes welling up. "I spent 3 years in darkness, Sadie. I thought my life was over when she died in that hospital. But you walked into that hallway with a bucket of dirty water, a grey uniform, and a courage I had never seen before. You cleansed my soul. You brought the light back to me." Sadie touched his face, feeling the rough beard under her calloused fingers. "You saved me too, Julian. You saw me when no one else did. Do not call me sir. Never again." He held her hand to his face, closing his eyes at the touch. "I am just the man who loves you, and who will spend the rest of his life trying to deserve you." He leaned in and kissed her. It was not a movie kiss, technical and cold. It was a desperate kiss, full of salty tears, of relief and promise. A kiss from two people who had survived the shipwreck alone and found solid ground in each other. 6 months later, the Sterling Mansion Gardens was unrecognizable. It was alive, blooming with jasmine and lavender that perfumed the spring air. The sun shone on the white chairs arranged on the emerald green lawn. Ms. Ruth, seated in the first row of honor, wept profusely into an embroidered lace handkerchief. She was flushed, had gained weight, healthy, breathing freely without machines, thanks to the cutting-edge pulmonary treatment she had received in recent months. She wore a new pink silk dress and held the hand of a private nurse who now cared for her like a companion. She looked at the altar with infinite pride. At the makeshift altar under an arch of natural flowers, Julian waited. He no longer looked tired or sad. He looked 10 years younger. He looked alive. The music began. Not the traditional and pompous wedding march, but a soft piano melody, Eleanor's favorite. Sadie entered. She was not wearing the blue dress from the night of the nightmare. She wore white, a simple, flowing, elegant dress that floated in the wind like a cloud. In her hands, instead of a bouquet of expensive flowers, she carried something different, something unique. She walked to the altar, smiling at her mother, at her former cleaning colleagues, who were invited and seated in the front rows, along with the bank directors. When she reached Julian's side, they turned to the officiant. But before the ceremony began, Julian did something unexpected. He picked up a small, golden frame that was resting on a side table. Inside the anti-glare glass frame, preserved forever as the most valuable relic of that house, was the yellowed, crumpled, and tear-stained letter. The letter that had come from the trash to save 2 broken hearts. He placed the frame in the center of the altar, between them under the sunlight. "She is here with us," Julian whispered to Sadie, squeezing her hand. "She blessed us. She knew I needed you even before I did." Sadie looked at the letter, then at her healthy mother laughing in the audience, then at the man who held her hand so tightly it seemed he would never let go. "Yes." Sadie smiled, and the sun illuminated her face, erasing any shadow of the past. "Rags to riches, Julian, but the greatest luxury in the world is having peace and love." They kissed to the applause and cheers of the guests, an unlikely mix of cleaners and bankers, neighbors from the projects and magnates, united by the story of that modern Cinderella. Far from there, in a cold, damp and solitary holding cell at the maximum security state penitentiary, Marcus looked at a small black and white TV mounted on the wall, which showed the news of the wedding of the year in the local newspaper. He saw Sadie's smile. He saw Julian's embrace. He angrily turned off the TV and lay on the hard concrete bed, staring at the empty, stained ceiling, finally understanding too late that curiosity did not kill the cat. Greed and arrogance killed the cat, but in the garden, the party was just beginning, and life, the true life Sadie deserved, had finally said yes to her. So did you like this story of triumph and justice? Do you think Marcus got the punishment he deserved in prison, or should he have suffered more? Was Sadie's attitude of forgiving the past and moving forward, taking care of her mother, inspiring to you? Tell us in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us. Until the next exciting story.